ವಿನಾಯಕ ಫಲದಾಯಕ ನೀನೇ ನೀನೇ ವಿನಾಯಕ ಮಂಗಳದಾಯಕ ವಿದ್ಯಾರಂಭದಿ ಭಜಿಸುವೆ ನಿನ್ನನು ವಿದ್ಯಾರಂಭದಿ ಭಜಿಸುವೆ ನಿನ್ನನು ವಿದ್ಯಾ ಪಾಲಿಪುದೆನಗೆ ವಿನಾಯಕ ವಿದ್ಯಾ ಪಾಲಿಪುದೆನಗೆ ನೀನೆ ವಿನಾಯಕ ಮಂಗಳದಾಯಕ ಫಲದಾಯಕ ನೀನೆ.
Good morning, honorable dignitaries, respected faculty and dear students. I, Bhumika Shahpur from second year BA LLB of Universal School of Law. It is my privilege to present the distinguished guest profile of a luminary of Indian jurisprudence, Dr. Justice Ashok B. Inchigeri, a name synonymous with integrity, intellect and unwavering constitutional commitment. Dr. Justice Ashok B. Inchigeri was born in 1960 in Hubli, Karnataka. He is distinguished figure in Indian jurisprudence known for his commitment to justice, integrity and constitutional morality. Raised in a family emphasizing simplicity, ethics and community service, his upbringing shaped his belief that character is the first qualification of any public servant. He completed his education at Government First Grade College, Hubli and Government Law College, Bangalore, where he developed a deep sense of justice as a societal responsibility. Starting his judicial career in the early 1990s, Dr. Justice Inchigeri became renowned for his sharp reasoning and unwavering commitment to constitutional principles. His rulings, particularly in constitutional rights, civil liberties and anti-corruption, have had a lasting impact on Indian law. He firmly believed in constitutional guarantees of Article 14, 19 and 21. In addition to his judicial contribution, Dr. Justice Inchigeri has been an influential legal scholar, teaching and mentoring future legal minds. He received the Padma Shri for his contribution to public life and justice. Even after his retirement, he continues to inspire through his teaching and public speaking, stressing that justice is not a profession, it is a promise. His legacy built on his judgments, humility and dedication to the rule of law continues to guide future generations in the legal field. We are deeply honored to have such an inspiring personality before us. Sir, your presence elevates this occasion and your journey continues to inspire the future of India's legal fraternity. Thank you.
It gives me immense pleasure to be amidst you to share my random thoughts on this insightful issue, why India ranks high on GDP but low on human rights. I would at the very outset refer to what was meaningfully said by Dalai Lama. Dalai Lama said, reiterating the sameness in human beings, Dalai Lama said, all human beings are the same. They are made up of human blood, human flesh, human bones. And that is why all of them are entitled. All of them have equal freedom. Entitlement of freedom to what? Right to be happy and right to avoid suffering. That's a human right. Every human being has a right to be happy and to avoid suffering. More or less similar definition is given by the former Secretary General of the UN, Kofi Annan. When somebody asked him, what are these human rights? He gives a very simple but very significant answer. Human rights are those which make us human. Human rights are those which make us human. David Selby, an academician par excellence, defined human rights as those rights which pertain to all persons and are possessed by every individual because they are human beings. Human rights are those rights which are inherent to all human beings without any discrimination of sex, nationality, race, caste, community or other status. Human rights are neither earned nor bought nor inherited nor created by any contractual undertaking. Human rights are the rights possessed by all human beings. Human rights are those rights without which human beings cannot live with dignity, freedom and justice. Human rights are those minimal rights which every individual must have against the state or other public authority. They are inherent, innate, absolute, inalienable, indivisible, interrelated and interdependent rights of a human being. Human rights are supplementing human welfare. European thinkers commonly refer to them as natural rights. In brief, we can say that human rights are universally accepted principles which support morality and which enable every human being to realize his or her full potentiality and to live life in an atmosphere of freedom, justice, equality and peace. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights of 1948 specifies an extensive list of basic and fundamental rights that all civilized nations must recognize as authoritative. It is supposed to concern the human family, all peoples, all nations in the spirit of brotherhood. Now, with this basic understanding of human rights, let me venture to answer the question that is formulated today for today's discussion. Why India ranks high on GDP but low on human rights? As you all know, India has been consistently, steadily achieving high GDP rates, sometimes even exceeding 7 to 8% per annum. But why it is low on human rights? Multiplicity of factors account for our society being low on human rights. First is concentration of wealth and the consequent degrading poverty. You will be surprised to know, in our country, 1% of the total population owns 40% of the resources. 1% of India's total population owns 40% of India's total resources. World's poorest of the poor people, 30% of them, they reside in India. As Mahatma Gandhi said once, even God cannot appear before a hungry man except in the form of bread. if you are not in a position to cater to the basic requirements of the people, these social rights, political rights, and other rights would lose their very significance. I will share a joke with you. When Germany was divided into East Germany and West Germany. West Germany had the capitalistic economy. East Germany, as you know, had a communistic form of government. And a big wall was erected to divide, to demarcate East Germany and West Germany. One day, a dog from West Germany, it stood on the wall, high wall, and shouted at the dog in the East Germany, "Hey, you fellow, you don't even have the right to bark. What kind of existence is that? You do not even have the right to bark. Look here, I belong to West Germany. I have the right to bark." The dog from West Germany responded, "Why do you bark? You bark because you need something. I don't have to bark because I don't need anything." Meaning, food, clothing, shelter are the basic requirements. Other things can always wait, but food, clothing, shelter have to be, provided to the people. In the Soviet Union, in the erstwhile Soviet Union, they first started this, they introduced this theme or experiment of equal wages for equal work. But later, they made further progress. Further progress was, it's the right step in the direction of promoting and protecting human rights. Further step was, from each according to his work to each according to his need. Meaning, I and you may be working for same number of hours, do the same nature of the work. But you have 2 children, you have 2 dependents, you, your wife and 2 dependents, 4. Whereas I have, my parents, my 4 children, my strength of my family is 7, 8. Since your family has only 4 members, you get 5 rubles. Since my family has 8 members, I will get 10 rubles. That was considered as a human right. My professor in Jawaharlal Nehru University used to tell me, if you are not a communist in your 20s, you are no heart at all. You are a heartless fellow. You have to be a communist in your 20s. And if you are not an anti-communist, if you are not an anti-communist in your 40s, then you are no head at all. So, to promote, protect human rights, we should have both the head and the heart. Second factor, which is impeding the protection of human rights, is unemployment problem. Overall unemployment problem in India is only 9.2%. But the percentage of younger population unemployed is 83%. Then third factor is low public spending on health, education and transportation. Many people think it's a wasteful expenditure. Why there should be any budgetary outlay for these things? But in my unmistakable view, It is not to be treated as an expenditure. It is to be treated as an investment into the people. Until that happens, it is very difficult to promote and protect fundamental rights, human rights. Then, next factor is overpopulation. We are, about or over 140 crores. And wherever you go, there is overcrowding. Where there is overcrowding, human rights are invariably disregarded. The next factor is deep-seated or deep-rooted caste and community differences, which are coming in the way of social cohesion and emotional integration. Crime clock is ticking on the weaker sections. So many cases are being registered against violence, rapes, mass rapes. But if you see the conviction rate, it's only approximately 4.3. So the privileged persons think they can do whatever they want to do with impunity and get away with that. Next one is corruption. Corruption and human rights cannot go together. They cannot go hand in hand. If you have to promote, protect human rights, you have to put an end to corruption. If you can't put an end, at least if you can substantially reduce the magnitude of corruption. Supreme Court has said in the case of Vinit Narayan, you are entitled to corruption-free government. That's your fundamental right. That's your human right. You are entitled to corruption-free government. But it has not happened. As per what is that organization? Transparency International. In the Corruption Perception Index, India ranks 96. Meaning, there are at least 95 countries above India who are not corrupt or less corrupt. The least corrupt countries are Denmark, Finland, out of about 180 countries. Down below, most corrupt countries are Sudan and Somalia. Even when we don't seek any favor from the official machinery, we are entitled to that by virtue of a statutory provision. But unless, as you know, the palms are used, the easy work will not be done. How you see the human rights can be promoted and protected in such an atmosphere? Then, next factor is gender disparity. I remember a few months ago I had contributed an article to our magazine Vakil Vahini. I don't know if Madam has read it. Women are not getting their due representation in any higher institution. It's with a sense of profound pain that I am making this observation. Whenever the open competition, that is recruitment, takes place, women outnumber men. Look at this. Women outnumber men. In the last recruitment to the cadre of civil judges, some 233 were selected. Out of them, 18 were lady candidates, lady advocates. Only 14, 15 were used. But you come to the elevation to the High Court and Supreme Court, women advocates do not even constitute, 15% of, the higher judiciary of several high courts and of the Supreme Court. So one of the suggestions that I made in my article is hold the competitive examination for elevation to the High Court and Supreme Court also, and lady advocates should outnumber, male advocates. We talk of human rights, but a woman cannot even decide in the Indian context whether she has to conceive, she has to retain the pregnancy or terminate the pregnancy. That is decided by the male members of the family. Article 41 should also include the reproductive rights of mothers. Whether to bear a child or to abort the pregnancy is a crucial aspect of the personhood of a woman. That is, it has to be left to the self-determination of the pregnant woman. Women has a right to exercise intimate personal choices and control over the vital aspect of her body. Whether to become pregnant or not, whether to retain the pregnancy and deliver the child, is a choice that she and she alone can make. A woman owns her body and has absolute right over that. Therefore, she alone should be the choice maker. Reproductive autonomy is also a human right. Then you come to child rights. Child rights are an important facet of human rights all over the country. Almost all the countries, both in the West and East, have banned child trafficking. But I ask myself this question, for which I have no answer. Where is the girl child safe? Where is the girl child safe? It's not safe in the house, it's not safe in the bus, it's not safe in the hospital, it is not safe in the hostel. Then where is she safe?
In the room.
Very difficult to see answer. So this calls for a lot of heart searching and introspection. Friends, we all have to give due respect to the women and protect the children, and more so the girl children. In one of my judgments I have said, childhood is very precious. Once the child becomes major, she attains the age of majority, that girl child can be given, a good husband, a good job, good property, good status, whatever. But what is it that cannot be given to that child, which has attained majority, of course? Only one thing, and that is her precious childhood. So we all have to realize, child's name is not tomorrow. Child's name is only today, today and today. That is we have to realize. And yet another important factor accounting for the abuse or violation of the child rights is rooted in our attitude itself. If I have a daughter, I have two daughters, of course. I will tell her, okay, do not come home late. Do not be found in isolated or secluded place. Do not dress in a provoking manner. This is what I am going to tell her. But if I have a son, should I not tell my son, don't indulge in you teasing, respect your girl classmates? I will not say, Henry, ಆ ಹುಡುಗರು ಏನಾರು ಮಾಡ್ತಿರ್ತಾರೆ ಬಿಟ್ರೆ ಅನ್ಬಿಟ್ರಿ. See the duality in our attitude. How are the child's rights going to be protected? I have seen in very crowded places attacks take place on girl children. The passers-by, they just ignore it. Right? It's not my child. How am I concerned with that? I try to save that child, then that person may attack me. What a bankruptcy of thinking. It can happen to that child. Tomorrow it can happen to your child. There is no doubt that we are not the biological parents of all the children. We are not the biological parents. But we are the societal parents. Societal parents of all the children. An attack on one child is to be taken as an attack on my child. Only then child rights can be. The last but not the least factor for India being low on human rights is our spiritual poverty. We have no fear of God, no fear of anything. We have no sense of Papa Punya. That accounts for the rise in the crime rate, rise in the violations of the human rights. India has a rich legacy of what should be an entitlement and what should be an obligation. But we have unfortunately de-linked ourselves from the sense of entitlement and obligation. Different people have different expectations, and rightly so. What I mean to say, human rights vary from person to person, from age to age, from situation to situation. For example, an old man, which you may not have thought that is a human right at all. An old man or a disabled man who is finding it difficult to walk down the distance. He wants to go to the bank and draw some money. But he avoids going there because he has to climb the stairs to the ATM or to the bank. What is his human right? His human right is construction of railings and ramps. That is his human right. An old man, I mean to say elderly persons or senior citizens, what does he expect from the younger members of the family? What is his human right? Nobody talks to him, nobody is bothered about him, nobody inquires about him. He just left high and dry, left his fate. What is it that he expects from you? From the younger members of the family, I mean. He doesn't want anything from you, but he wants only one thing, and that is your mere presence, your mere hug, your smile would you see make him very happy. That's his human right. How India always protected human rights is discoverable from an episode in the epic period. Lord Rama, defeated, killed the demon Rama. And Rama called upon Ravana's brother Vibhishana, look, do the funeral. arrange for the funeral of your brother. Vibhishana flatly refuses and says no. I will not do that. Rama says, why? He's your brother after all. It's your moral obligation. He says, no, he's a wicked man. He has kidnapped somebody's wife, detained her. And such a man cannot be given any post-death honors or rituals. He is not handed. I will not do that. Then Lord Rama said, see these words. However wicked a man was during his lifetime, once he dies, all the wickedness goes with that. Even a dead person is entitled to a decent burial. That was Rama's concept of entitlement and obligation. But we read in today's newspaper, some persons when they die, because they belong to a particular community, they are not even provided with, the burial ground or the cremation ground. Look at this. A person who is dead, what could be the expectation? What is the human right of his family members? The human right of his family members is only to get some place where he could be buried or cremated. That's all. It doesn't happen sometimes. Dead body is kept before the disease office for days together. That's what I read in the newspaper. Compare this episode with what happened immediately after the Second World War in Italy. You all know that Mussolini was a tyrant, worst ever tyrant that the world has ever produced. He wanted to escape to Greece, but he was identified and he was captured. He was shot. Even when he died of bullet injuries, people still started showering the bullets on him. Not only that, they took the dead body, the mutilated dead body, to an important town in Italy, Milan, and made his dead body hang upside down with his head down, and called upon the people of Milan, come, spit on him. The body was kept in that position for 2-3 days to enable the people to come and spit on him. People were being casual to come and spit on Mussolini's dead body. That is their concept of human rights. So we dealt with the factors impeding the inclusive growth and consequently the promotion and protection of human rights. I am only reminded of what a very stout giant defender of human rights, R.J. Vincent, said. The provision for subsistence rights should have precedence over other human rights. Subsistence right is also a human right. There are other human rights, they can wait. But subsistence rights should have precedence over other human rights. I would wind up. My friends on the dais have been very kind to me, particularly in tolerating me even when I overstepped my slot. I thank the organizers of this function for inviting me, for showering so much of affection on me, for enabling me to share some of my random thoughts with this audience. Thank you.
So Honorable Justice Henchigiri has already made my job much easier. But thank you to universal institutions, Justin Tosh, Dr. Meera Krishnappa, and your principal of your law college, who has a beautiful name. I don't know if all of you know the name of the principal of the law college. She's called Jewel. And in southern Africa, we have many beautiful names. So a lot of people are called Happiness, Peace. So I think all of you should be happy today as we discuss human rights. I was saying earlier that, giving a talk on human rights to all these distinguished lawyers and justices and additional advocate generals, etc., is a bit embarrassing, because you all know much more about the legality of human rights than me. But I am excited about the idea of speaking to the students here who are thinking about these issues with an open mind. Because, as you know, today's India, we've reached a situation where everything is very polarized. Everybody has made up their mind on which side they are and how they think about the world. So I think I'm more hopeful about younger people and that they will approach this with a more open mind. I want to thank Chairman Upendra, because human rights in India is not a very simple topic. It's a very complicated topic, and it's also an area where angels fear to tread, because it opens up many wounds easily. So let's see how we tread on this. Fortunately, I was worried as to what you might be saying, sir, but we are very convergent in our thinking. That helps. Wasn't sure where Justice Henchkri will take us today. But since you spoke at length and we have a time constraint, I've been given 40 minutes, but I think in 40 minutes you'll all go to sleep. So I'll try and keep it shorter. But I remembered Kofi Annan, who was one of my bosses in my previous life, who used to be the Secretary General of the United Nations. So I remembered one of the events where he was asked to speak. The previous speaker had many previous speakers had spoken at length on the same topic, and it was late evening and everybody was looking tired in the audience. So he came up to the stage and he said, my speech writers have given me two speeches. One is a long version and one is a short version. And he said, since I'm not sure, of course the audience was hoping he's going to read the short version. So he said, but since I'm not sure, I'm going to read both the versions. So then he said, the short version is thank you and the long version is thank you very much, and he went and sat down. That might be a bit extreme. So I'll try and keep mine brief and skip the points which I think Justice has spoken more eloquently about. So broadly I wanted to touch on what are human rights, because there is a lot of confusion as to what exactly this is. Because as I said, it's a very divisive topic as well. But I think Justice has done quite a good job. I won't spend much time on that. The second part I want to talk about is what is the status of human rights in India. Again, you touched upon that, so we can go faster on that. The third is what are the drivers? What's behind why India is where it is on human rights? And I think we should talk a bit about that in a little bit more detail. Although again, you've touched on it. But the fourth, which is kind of important, is to how do we fix this? Because we are not trying to list problems, we're trying to find solutions. So I'll try and cover all four elements, and my friend, you'll have to move with me on this. So let's talk about that's a good place. So those of you who are here, unfortunately my slides are there. You have to go to the first slide, please. I'll tell you when to shift. Let's just start here. So I think that, and by the way, for the students particularly, I will ask you some questions as we go along. I just want to know what your thinking is. Don't feel shy. Please do raise your hands or make a noise when I ask the question, because I want to know where your thoughts are, particularly as young people. So I think that the first point, and it's very nice that the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and universal institutions have the same starting names. So the first article of the Universal Declaration starts by saying all humans are born free and equal in dignity and rights. And the interesting thing about this is that some of you may be aware, but some others might not, that the wording of Article 1 previously in the first draft of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights didn't say all human beings, it said all men. And there was an Indian woman called Hansal Mehta who changed this. And I was asked to speak at IIM Ahmedabad, which is my alma mater, about human rights, and a TED talk. And that's when I told them that, the good thing is that Hansal Mehta had changed the very wording of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And I said that, it just proves that not all Gujaratis are against human rights. So on to how this converts into the Indian context. The Indian context, of course, for us, human rights is what is articulated in the Constitution of India. And you're very aware of, I'm sure you have enough classes on Constitution and all of that, and the core preamble of values of justice, liberty, equality, fraternity kind of gives you the essential core of what human rights are within the context of a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic. All of these are currently under challenge, so it's very important to look at each of these words very carefully and thoughtfully. So I think that what I thought might be helpful to do, and so broadly speaking, when you think about human rights, President Roosevelt had classified it into these two categories: freedom from want and freedom from fear. And as the Justice said, the two sets, freedom from want and freedom from fear, are both interdependent and indivisible. So this is a classic debate that's gone on, because typically when you say human rights, people think of civil political rights, which is what we classify as freedom from fear. But please do not disconnect the two. The two are deeply connected, interconnected, and we'll talk more about that as we go along. So now, this is my first question I want to ask you. So when you think about all human beings are free and equal, which means that, everybody has the same rights. In the Indian context, do you think first and foremost that should all people deserve all human rights? What is your view on this? If you think that everybody deserves equal human rights for all, please raise your hand. Okay, so some of you think they do not deserve, or you don't want to raise your hand? Okay, thank you. I'm particularly asking the students, not the people in the front row, but you're welcome to raise your hand. So I think that's an obvious question to ask. But I think the more important question is, as we speak about India today, do you feel that all Indians are currently enjoying freedoms and human rights equally?
No.
Okay, that's good. Makes my job easier. But it's good to know the starting point. So I think this is an interesting question, right? So we all think that this is important, everybody equally deserves it, but in reality it doesn't work like that. And again, Justice spoke about some of the reasons driving this, but let's dive deeper into this. I think that, I remember the first time I went to Brazil to set up Amnesty International in Brazil, and some of the people I was talking to were asking me, why do you want to do this human rights thing in Brazil, etc. Because ultimately what you're trying to do is to protect the rights of black people who live in the favelas, which is the slums of Brazil. And a lot of the people in the favelas are also involved in drug war and a lot of violence in the cities of Brazil, Rio and Sao Paulo, etc., some of the most dangerous cities in the world. So they said that, you're coming to Brazil to protect the rights of all these criminals. Now let's come to India, which is kind of closer home. So you'll remember what happened in Delhi in the Nirbhaya case, where this woman was brutally raped. You're all familiar with the Nirbhaya story, the rape in Delhi and all of that, right? So now obviously it was a gruesome crime, and nobody can be in favor of that happening. But I think the question after that was the people who are caught in this whole process, who are the kind of perpetrators of this atrocity. The reaction was, we should, the kind of extreme suggestions of what should happen to these people. I won't go into that, it's quite graphic, but there was immediate reaction saying that, we should lynch them, we should kill them. Now, this is not human rights, because even those who create the most heinous crimes, the whole idea of human rights is that there's a due process, that everybody deserves a fair trial, all sides have to be heard, and then of course the punishment could be meted out to those who have committed the crime, but there is a process. The other extreme case which comes up in India very often is Kashmir. Now Kashmir, as you know, is a hot potato in India. It's a kind of Palestine of India. So he was saying that Mussolini is the worst, one of the worst human rights offenders. Now with Netanyahu, we are not sure as to who is taking that place. But I think the question is that in the case of Kashmir, where obviously there are activities, violent activities taking place by some sections of that population, but it is equally true that the armed forces have had a lot of answering to do about the way in which they are dealing with the violence there. So this becomes another very hotly debated question. So we have something like the Armed Forces Special Protection, AFSPA, you might have heard of AFSPA. So AFSPA gives certain immunity to armed forces. But this is a very contested issue in human rights discussions as to, if you're a security force and if you're attacking a terrorist group, are there some boundaries or not? And human rights says that there are some rules of engagement. You cannot just do whatever you want just because you're the army. Now most Indians would say, no. If they're, Muslim terrorists, then there are no rules involved. Because they're harming our country, we can do whatever we want. So I'm just asking you to think about this. And, when we say human rights, these are all the kind of questions that start coming into mind. And these are the kind of, and it's not a very clear answer sometimes. There's trade-offs. So I think just give it some thought. Please, let's move. So it's really important to understand that, India's achievements since independence, almost 80 years now, we have had some phenomenal achievements. So as I progress, I don't want to kind of belittle the importance, and I won't go into all this, but whether it's in education, girls, enrollment, number of, the maternal deaths which are happening, we had a very bad record on the way in which women die during childbirth. On all of those, we've seen quite important progress. Similarly, on some of the macro business-related things, like ease of doing business, global competitiveness, all of these, they've really improved, and of course, macroeconomic growth, which we talked about. But having said that, overall, whether we take the economic, social, cultural rights indicators, or you take the civil, political rights indicators, unfortunately, whatever be our political affiliations, you can't get around facts. Unfortunately, in the last decade, we have seen very serious reversals when it comes to civil political rights and stagnancy when it comes to economic, social, cultural rights. And this is data from multiple sources. I think one of the shocking realities is that this is happening despite high growth. And we'll go into this question as to why. Because I remember when I used to travel in rural areas with Action Aid in India, you meet a district collector, you meet the state apparatus in villages and districts. They really had no resources because you feel a bit sorry for them because you say, oh, you should do this, you should do that. But they had no capacity, no resources. We are in a different situation now. But thanks to our macroeconomic growth, etc., the state has a lot of resources now. It's not like before. Of course, it's never enough, but we do have a lot of resources. So why are we in the situation, despite having more resources, that even countries like Bangladesh and Nepal, our neighboring countries, are doing much better, particularly on economic, social, cultural rights indices, is something we should talk about. In fact, if you remove the southern and western states of India, the four southern states, Maharashtra and Gujarat, then on most indicators we start becoming comparable to sub-Saharan Africa, which is quite, shocking when you think about it. So let's move. So maybe let me just pause and ask all of you that do you think that in your own perception, because there's a lot of talk about India's growth, etc., but in your perception, the facts are here, but in your perception, do you think in the last decade, if you take things like employment, food, health, education, do you think India has improved, stayed static, or gone down? What's the sense? How many of you think we've improved in the last decade? Okay. How many of you think we're static? How many of you think we've gone down? I'm just talking about economic, social, like food, health, education, water, those kinds of things. There's no hesitation in the room. Is it because you're not sure? Well, you could be not sure, of course. But the fact of the matter is that, we are, if you take many of these indices which are listed here, Human Development Index we'll come back to, which is a composite index of the United Nations. We were 130 in 2014 and we're still exactly in the same place. if you take the gender indices, which Justice talked about as well, India is one of the most unsafe countries in the world for women. If you take the hunger index, I won't go into each of these. I'm happy to share these slides for the benefit of the students. I think, Madam Principal, you can share all this data later. I don't want to keep your time, but poverty you mentioned, Justice mentioned, that we have 400 million people living below the poverty line. We have 40% of our children, nearly 40% of India's children are malnourished. We take questions at the end. 39% is stunting, 30 to 39% is stunting. And I can go on. 800 million people in this country are living off daily rations through the employment generation programs, through the food distribution programs, the PDS system. So the numbers are quite staggering. The interesting thing, of course, on a lot of the data now is that, this government is also not very happy with data coming out, which is uncomfortable. So often we are changing the data itself, changing the baseline year. And you might have heard that last week the International Monetary Fund has given a C category, which is the second lowest category for the quality of our data. So, if you can always change the baseline year and make it look like your poverty levels have reduced, but that doesn't change the facts. So let's go to the most alarming one, which is directly linked to today's discussion. So this is, you could say, as a proxy for human rights, because democracy and human rights are obviously very closely interrelated. By the way, Amnesty's position is that democracy and human rights are not the same thing. So we've always said that just because you're a democracy, you can't make an excuse for not ensuring human rights. And if you're not a democracy, you can't say we're not a democracy, so we don't need to have human rights. So democracy for us was the means. The end was human rights, or human welfare, or human development, whatever you want to call it. But if you look at most of the democracy and human rights indices, that's where we've seen the most serious decline. Whether it's the Freedom Index, Freedom House Index, which is about reporters without borders, the Press Freedom Index, and all these we have significantly gone down. So let's move. So let's talk about the drivers. I think again, Justice talked about this. Why are we in this situation today? While doing this, I want to just remind you that, human rights is not just a legal question. Because when we say justice, it goes beyond the laws. The drivers go beyond legal factors. And the central tenet of human rights, as you know, is about accountability. So the question is, is the perpetrator being held to account or not? Are the victims being given justice? So keep that in your mind. And typically what happens is, either it's governments or corporations who are the perpetrators of crimes. Of course, there are societies where we have talked about caste and religion, etc. That also causes a lot of human rights violations. But typically, governments and corporations are at the receiving end of questions of accountability. So typically, no government in the world, no corporate in the world likes human rights. So I've been at the receiving end of a lot of criticism from governments and corporations across the world. And India is no exception. Now, as I said, the relationship between democracy and human rights is a tricky one, but we have to remember that one is the means, the other is the ends. I'm particularly trying to explain this to the students because some of this could be a bit confusing as we go along. So I think let me just focus on the drivers for this. Now, I'm now talking about the drivers for the big collapse in our democracy and human rights indices in the last 10 years. Now, I want to clarify that, this is a very contested set of issues, and as you know, in India, everything you say is true and untrue. Because it all depends on who you are, where you sit, and how you're thinking. So, I'm sure there are enough people in this room who would not agree with a lot of these indices, but that's fine. The beauty about India is you can still say it and get away with it, almost. So, I think the checks and balances are a big question, whether it's a parliament, the judiciary, the executive. There's a lot of those things have got compromised. The media is now, so dependent on government revenue that the mainstream media is very, very cautious or silent or just singing praises of one side. And by the way, this is not a political statement I'm making because it's not like in the previous regime things were much better. India has never had a very good record of human rights. Now we've reached another low, but the blame is there on both sides. So where we have Congress governments in power, a lot of these questions come back again. So whoever is in power, we will have to hold them to account. So I again, I don't want to go into each of these in details. I don't know if you guys are able to see this. Can you actually read this from the back? You can't. Okay. Even the younger people can't read it. Oh, that's a problem. Maybe this light, could you turn this particular light off? Do you know if this light can be turned off? That one light going off might help. I don't know if you know where that light is. I was wondering that. Is that slightly better?
Yeah, it is.
So now you can read what, half of it. Okay, then maybe I should take 30 seconds to just explain it, because I was assumed. So you were not able to read anything so far, or it just got worse? When there's more letters, more text, I guess it becomes more difficult. So, but broadly speaking, we say, there's so many laws which have been introduced, and here the legal folks here are, very relevant in this conversation. So if you take laws, a lot like UAPA, by any international human rights standards, we do not consider this as, meeting those standards, because you cannot have a situation where the person is guilty until proven innocent. And we have many laws like this which have been introduced. Some of the guardrails of democracy and human rights in this country have been eroded. For example, the Right to Information Act, which was very central to ensuring transparency and accountability, has been weakened, both the law itself but also the practice of it. Similarly, the Forest Rights Act, which is central to Adivasis and indigenous people in this country, have been systematically demolished in many places. And the big corporates, particularly the Adani, Ambani corporates, have benefited massively from mining rights, etc. being given, environmental clearances being lower, and this list is long. The way in which the institutions of the state are being used, whether it's income tax, CBI, etc., is also highly suspect. Justice spoke about the Corruption Perception Index. Now, this is very important because, of course, corruption affects everybody. But corruption hits poor people the most because they cannot afford. It's like a tax. It's an additional tax for poor people who have to pay for everything. Now, if you're an Adani or Ambani, you're probably also corrupt. But you have the capacity to pay and manage that, and that's done in a very sophisticated way. Here it's a daily attack. If you're being attacked by a forest guard who you have to pay money to that person, it's a different, what it means to you, corruption is very, very different. Similarly, I think as you go into this question of, let's move to the next one. Yeah, so this is kind of the central point of today's discussion in a way. And we have this very strange situation in India. Again, I don't know how many of you can see this from the back. But essentially, if you compare the x-axis, which is the horizontal axis, is I think the x-axis refers to the HDI, the Human Development Index, which stays static at about 130 or so. The y-axis is our GDP rank, and we've been going up and up. I think we're number 4 now. And very soon we're going to become the 3rd largest economy in the world. Now this is very, very unusual. Typically when your Human Development Index goes up, most countries, at least the economic, social, cultural rights, health, water, education, all that significantly jumps. Now we've seen there's an almost unexplained gap between the two, which even a country like say Saudi Arabia, which obviously doesn't have many civil political rights, but they have a lot of resources. Their rights and economic, social, cultural rights are much, much higher than India. And this is true more or less all across the globe. So how does this get, I don't know if this is clear to all of you, but if the question then is, how does this get explained? And there are 2 broad factors for this, so let's move to the next one. One which has been talked about, which is the shocking levels of inequality. Justice has already mentioned that. The numbers are just staggering on how unequal India is. There's been a recent World Bank report which has been very contested, which is now questioning this data because they're using consumption data. But leaving that aside, broadly speaking, I think we are in a difficult position, and most of the inequality is resident in, the worst impact of inequality is felt by the bottom third of the population, which is typically lower caste, minorities and women across all groups. The point about the lowest spenders on health and education, I just wanted to highlight this, which Justice mentioned. See, I'm sure you've thought about this, but rich people in this country, or those who can afford it, do not use state facilities for health and education. They use private facilities. So whenever state spending goes down or is low, it affects the poor. It doesn't affect the rich as much. In fact, I was speaking to an admission officer who was driving with me in the car open that day, and I was asking him, how is your fee structure? Are your students from rich families or poor backgrounds? And he was saying it is very mixed. You have a very mixed background, and you also have scholarships for those who can't afford it. But he was telling me that, sometimes even when the students were sitting here, they have to come and pay the fees. Many of them are in tears and they cannot afford to pay the fees, which I was being told is modest compared to other law privileges. But that's the reality. So we have to understand that the impact of all this is mostly on the bottom third of the population. And that bottom third in India is lower caste, minorities and women. Please remember that as we proceed. So this is a classic, debate, freedom or bread. In my view, it's a false debate, and I'll explain to you why this is a false debate. And this kind of explains the Cold War division between communist and capitalist countries, which was touched upon earlier. But on the democracy question, as you all remember, the first 30 years or so after the Cold War, we saw a big boom, at least in electoral democracies. Now, one of the big problems is when we start equating democracy with elections, then you start taking shortcuts. But for the time being, I'm just using that as just a way to describe the situation. But in the first period after the Cold War, the number of electoral democracies almost doubled from 30% to 60%. But this dramatically changed in the last 10 to 15 years. So we've had the growth of what we call elected authoritarians. So forget about the Chinas and Russias and North Koreas where they don't even have elections. They don't pretend to be democracies. But in countries which pretend to be democracies like India, Brazil, Philippines, and many other countries, Hungary, Turkey, we've seen the phenomenon of Bolsonaro and of course most recently Trump in the US, who gets the most coverage. But these are people, we call these people as elected authoritarians. So this is a new phenomenon because in the past we were fighting military dictatorships, etc. Now these people are pretending to be democrats. They are elected through a democratic process, but in reality, a lot of the checks and balances have been removed, so they have a pretty much a free hand. So this is the current reality. Now I wanted to ask you, and the interesting thing about the skepticism about democracy, because if you ask a lot of people today, they have become very skeptical. They feel democracy is is a problem because the system doesn't work. And both from the right and the left, there's a critique of democracy today. So I want to ask you just quickly as students I'm not talking about parties or any particular election. I'm talking about democracy as a system of governance. How many of you feel that you can trust the system today? The younger people in the room, do you trust the democratic system that India has today? Do you feel a sense of trust or you're not sure? How many people trust it? Whoa. Right. So how many of you are not sure? Okay, so a lot of uncertainty. But interestingly, whereas globally, most of the surveys on the trust on democracy and the political system globally is quite low. In India, all the surveys show that it is quite high. So maybe the university institution students are smarter, brighter, so they're a bit more skeptical about it. But I want to just move to this question as to how we look at this. So I think that I call these people the Achedin people, the 150 million people in India who are benefiting from the last 10 years of growth, and they're mostly upper caste, middle class, upper caste people. So if you ask these people, they will say that democracy is a nuisance because look at Singapore, look at China, how these places are growing, so fantastic. And the reason why we are badly off today, if you say all these indices are going down, they'll say that's because this democracy is a nuisance. We should get rid of it. We should be like China and Singapore and North Korea. Then if you want to build a road, you can just build it overnight, Unnecessarily somebody will put a case, 15 years we are stuck in that. How many of you speak Kannada here? Whoa, okay. So Kannada road. Okay. So typically you'll get that. It's just a nuisance and all that. So, and that's from the kind of, I would say, is the kind of the more right-wing view in a sense. But I want to show you a clip, if it works. I don't know if it works. Tanish, do you think you can show this clip? This is a clip which would surprise many of you from Dr. Ambedkar. Does it work? Let's see if it works. I was a bit surprised that I had myself not seen this clip. Is there an audio you can give to them? No? If not, I'll just explain that to you. So this is Dr. Ambedkar in 1953. There's a BBC journalist interviewing him, and he was asked about, what do you think about democracy in India? And I don't know, maybe the lawyers in the room have seen this. I had actually not seen this before. I was quite surprised. I mean, of course we knew about what he said in the Constituent Assembly debates, but this particular clip, don't worry if you don't get the audio, we can see later on if you can fix it. But essentially what he's saying is that, elections are not going to, he's questioning parliamentary democracy's success in India because of the level of inequality. So his point is that until such time as we have a significant overhaul of the social system and we put an end to the extreme inequalities in India, parliamentary democracy is not going to deliver what we want. So I think we're in an interesting situation. I want to make the point that both from the, Danish, we can move to the next one. We'll come back to it later on if it works. But so I was just saying that, there's a very interesting situation where both the left and the right, in a sense, are skeptical about democracy. But I wanted to take you to, some of the more recent thinking on this, academic thinking on this. So you may have, I don't know how much of you follow this, but how many of you follow this, but some of the leading thinkers on the subject, most recently Acemoglu and Robinson, who got the Nobel Prize for Economics last year, have focused on this question. And I think I won't go into too much detail here, but essentially what Acemoglu's argument is that if you take the x-axis, which is how many years you've been a democracy, the years of democratization on the x-axis, and the y-axis is your GDP growth and your economic performance. So the point he's making is that the more democracy you have, the more sustained growth you're going to have. Now, of course, China is a loud and staring exception to this rule. But the question with, or even Rwanda for that matter, or Singapore, but those are very tiny countries. But broadly speaking, the argument they're making, for which they got the Nobel Prize last year, is that if you want to have sustained economic growth, you need to have institutions, checks and balances, etc. And the next slide, which is his most recent book called Narrow Corridor, the question he's answering is, how do you ensure democracy? So first, you need democracy for sustained growth and economic development. And if you need democracy, how do you ensure democracy? So the narrow corridor, again, I'm not going into the details, it takes a lot of time. But his main point is that if you, here the x-axis is society and the y-axis is state. And the main point that Acemoglu and Johnson are making here is that if you don't have a balance between the strength of society and the strength of the state, you are never going to have a sustained democracy. So if you have a very strong state and a very weak civil society, then you're going to have an imbalance, and that imbalance will not deliver sustained democracy to you. I'll give you a very short version of what it is. And therefore, it takes us back to where we started from. That if you want to have high human rights and high GDP growth, you need a much better balance between the strength of institutions, civil society, voice, participation, accountability, and a strong state. In the current Indian context, we have a super strong state and a weak and muzzled civil society, and that is not sustainable. And unfortunately, this is what we saw in our neighboring countries as well. So if you take Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Pakistan and Nepal, we were in a similar situation, and you saw what happened in each of these countries. There was an explosion. The There have been explosions in every neighboring country in India. Now, of course, India it's too large a country to expect something like this to happen, and you have a pretty, brutal state system which will not allow that kind of, uprisings. But you don't want to wait for an uprising. What you want to do is to fix it now. So if I can just close with the next step slides. So I think that we're not trying to find out what to diagnose the problem, we want to know what to do next. So here I think I'm very quickly touching on this. I think that unless you allow and support the organization of the bottom third of this country's population to have a voice, to organize themselves, to speak up, and here I'm talking about women and Bahujan using that short language, unless you stop the attacks on the lower caste of minorities and women, unless you repeal all unlawful laws, we are approving of those, unless you restore the independence of all institutions, public institutions, unless you unshackle the media, and unless you end the crony capitalism and criminal financing of elections. I mean, as you know, in Karnataka today also, in the previous version we had some 40% Sakara. I don't know what this version is now. And it's very standard, by the way. I was at a dinner the other day with friends of mine, and they were telling me that, previously the MLAs used to make, I don't know whatever number he said. Previously every year the MLAs used to make 1 crore every year, and now this is really bad because of these guarantees. So, and he's telling me this. So I said, what am I supposed to do with this information? So everything is fixed. In Karnataka, the rate cards are fixed. You want a job, you pay this. You want this, you get this. So and all these people who are making this illegal money then finance elections. So we're in that situation where it's a vicious circle. So I want to just close with the last. There's more we can do. I think you touched on it. This is about inclusive growth policies. Here, I just want to touch on one point. So, inclusive growth policies. Obviously, when you say inclusive broad-based growth, the question you're starting with is, what do we do to benefit the bottom third of the population? And here a hot potato is caste census and reservations. So I'll take you back to the starting of this discussion where I asked you, do you think that all are free and equal in this country? And many of you said, no. Now I don't know how many of you would then say that supporting those who do not have human rights, those who have been historically disadvantaged, they do need additional support, they do need affirmative actions, and they do need reservations. Because most of the upper caste in this country say, reservations is not needed because caste doesn't exist in this country. So I always ask this question as to, if you say caste in this country doesn't exist, what percentage of Indians marry intercaste? Does anybody know the answer to that? What percentage of Indians marry intercaste? Do you think it's 50%? Okay, so there's a lot of bright students in this. So it's 6% is, self-declared, so we'll see what the truth is. But, so everybody who says, there's no caste now, it's all in the past. So 6% of people intercaste marriage. So this is the reality of India. People give jobs on that basis, everything is big, that's your principal identity. So now if you think that reservations are valid, how are you going to give reservations if you don't have a caste census? Let's get the facts right first, right? But there's a lot of debate and controversy about that as well. So also, we didn't touch on the last point, which is about military expenditure. So India is now the third largest importer of military goods and the third largest spender on military in the world. And obviously, if you're going to be fighting with all your neighbors, because we're fighting with Pakistan, with China, with Bangladesh, everybody we're fighting, then your expenses are only going to go up. So for a poor country, relatively poor country, isn't it better for us to actually have better relationships, spend less on military, and use that money for better things? Now, unfortunately, we have governments, again, it's not just the BJP government. Every government thinks that the more you spend, the more you fight, then you're more nationalistic, you're hyper-nationalistic, you're seen as very patriotic. But you don't need to be patriotic by fighting. You can be patriotic by doing better things and respecting human rights as well. So I'm closing with the last slide, which is, as students, because people keep asking this question often to me, what can we do as individuals, as students? and I think it's very simple. Dr. Ambedkar had already suggested what we can do. First and foremost, I would say, educate yourself, understand the issues, because I don't know how many of you follow WhatsApp University. Because everything that was coming on WhatsApp, most of it is lies. Because the social media, the current regime has a whole trolling factory itself, but now the opposition also is becoming good at it. So everybody is telling lies. So we're kind of hyping up the fake news beyond all, conceptions. And now, when I was growing up, people who tell me, Allah, newspaper will believe that that's the truth. Nowadays they show you WhatsApp and say that's the truth. But please read, understand, get your facts right, and think critically about everything. So first, that's the most, do educate yourself and people you are with. Second, you have to organize. Because if you don't organize people as students, as communities, nothing is going to change. And then you have to raise your voice. So that was a simple mantra. By the way, when I say agitate, I'm not suggesting you go and throw stones. That's not the proposal. Do it peacefully. We have laws of the land. But you have to raise your voice, you have to organize yourself, and you have to come together collectively. Thank you very much.
The human rights organization being in Switzerland, why dumb duck on this blood money keeping bags? Is it not the double standards of custodians of human rights? Please correct me if I am wrong. That one question. Another question, sir. I was watching a podcast of about months back on YouTube. This is about the Singapore previous Prime Minister with the UN organization, one of the representatives. He asked why so strict, you people are very strict on drug peddling and drug users, and you give it, even if you get 1 ounce of drug, you are giving a death penalty. Then the answers from the Prime Minister of Singapore is, see, suppose we are liberal, my friend or your relative, my child, or whoever it is, they will start using drugs and start torturing their parents day in and day out. Day in and out, their relative, whoever it is, for taking money and other things. Suppose, what is your opinion? If you are telling it is by giving a death penalty to the drug abusers and the drug peddlers, it's a human right violation. What he said is it right? Day in day out, our child is torturing or giving a punishment to the parents and as well as the society.
Okay, you got it.
Yeah.
Got the question.
Yeah.
So first we will move we can move the High Commissioner for Human Rights to Bangalore.
Yeah.
We can make that recommendation. By the way, the cities, the places where most of the criminals keep their money right now is not Switzerland. Most of the criminal money is sitting in London, Dubai and Singapore. So Ambani and Adani also have shifted their family offices to, Ambani has shifted his family office to Singapore, Adani has shifted to Dubai. So we can shift UN High Commissioner to Bangalore. Anyway, Trump doesn't want the UN headquarters in New York also. We can move that also here. So, on the second question on death penalty, we are against death penalty under any circumstances. And there are very good reasons for it. Factually, countries which have introduced death penalty have not been able to reduce crime rates. And countries which have taken out death penalty, their crime rates have not gone up. So there is no correlation between death penalty and crime rates. And this is well evidenced. Almost 150 countries have stopped using death penalty. So, that's a strongman tactic. So typically, when we have all these 56-inch type leaders, they want death penalty. Why Kuso, Maro? It's not based on facts. It's based on testosterone.
I can't help feeling that a lot of the debate centers around the statistics that are involved. So I was interested in asking you as somebody who's right up there in the human rights discourse, what are the sources that you use? Or do you use the regular government, NCRB and other sources? Or what are your sources of data that you use to make your observations, especially for today's lecture?
So this is Nandkishore, right?
Yeah.
I think all the international organizations, so it depends on which index you're talking about. So for all the economic indices, normally it's government data that's used. For medium and all the kind of democracy ones, they will use data from the government, but that's interpretation. So you could argue that the interpretation is incorrect. Now, government of India has said that they don't like what's happening with the democracy index, they want to create their own democracy index. So, and we tend to do this. If you don't like the answer, we shoot the messenger.
Water down what you see, Shetty sir has said, but only to supplement what he has said. Second question, whether you see the death penalty is warranted. Unmistakable answer is in the negative, because punishment has to be proportional to the crime committed. That somebody has been in drug peddling does not call for taking away his life itself. 1. 2. With the march of civilization, we think of putting an end to the imposition of death sentence. Or maybe it may be retained in the rarest of the rare criminal cases. Because otherwise, what will be the difference between an individual and the state? Individual may be a killer, but state cannot be a killer. Thank you.
My question is addressed to Honorable Justice. First, I'd like to thank you for your insightful lecture. I was just wondering, in your capacity as Chairman of the Law Commission of Karnataka, if you could give us any insight to any reform that the government is working on to address these issues concerning the state itself.
Thank you very much for raising a timely question. Law Commission is in a way the research wing for the legislature. It recommends to the legislature what new laws are required to be made, what existing laws are to be repealed or amended. In this process, in the process of making recommendations for legislation, the Law Commission also gets the opportunity to reform the system in a meaningful way. On becoming the chairman of the Law Commission, my first report to the government, which I wrote to you, madam, now, was Menstrual Leave and Hygiene Act. See, a working woman, when she gets her periods, what does she expect? What is her human right? Tell me. She just doesn't want to work on that day. She wants to take a day off. There could be excessive bleeding, mood swings, uneasiness, pain, cramps. Should she not be given a days of leave every month? And should she not have an access to, say, sanitary napkins, cups, other things, free of cost, at the cost of the employer? I have made those recommendations. Government has substantially accepted, but not fully accepted. My duty is to recommend. Once I recommend, I become contest of issue. I don't have to do anything. It is for the government to take an issue. But I should not be failing in my duty. I will go on, preparing, progressive, reports which can, inclusively take care of all the people in the society. Not accepted. The next thing that I have in my mind is, since you have asked pointedly and I am sharing this with you, I propose to suggest the amendment to Maternity Leave Act. Now, the woman gets, one woman who delivers gets 6 months leave. I learned from the OBG, obstetrics and gynecology specialist, that breastfeeding takes place at least the woman, the new mother completes 9 months. Should she not have 9 months leave? Of course, with some riders. If a woman has the option of working from home, well and good, no leave. If woman has no option of working from home and in that workplace, there is no creech at all, what should she do? I learned after every 2 hours, the woman has to forcibly take out the breast milk, throw it. Whatever, such a precious thing. Mother's milk is being wasted. And recently I have also submitted one report on prevention of burn injuries and care of the burn injury victims. What was troubling my mind was this. Some misdirected boy gets an answer from the girl whom he loves, whom he wants to marry. The girl says no to him. She doesn't want to love him, she doesn't want to marry him. It is her choice. It is her choice. He just throws the acid on her. What happens? Not only that, there will be disfigurement. There could also be a loss of seeing capacity, loss of hearing capacity. Should she not be treated as a person with a disability under the statute and be given all the privileges? So these are the things which I keep on doing, and I will also take this opportunity that the college, the teachers, the students can take part in the process of suggesting the law to the legislature. It is not that I know everything or you know everything. It is never I versus you. It is always collective we. Collective we. Collective we will make you see all the responsibilities. So I would welcome the valuable inputs from all of you. And if you suggest that the law is required in this field, just come up with that.
In a rarest of rarest case, where the crime is exceptionally heinous, is this what death penalty is the highest punishment to be given for those cases?
Which cases?
I mean, for the case which the death penalty is awarded.
No. See, the settled law is death penalty is to be awarded, as I said a while ago, in the rarest of the rare cases, not in a rote or mechanical or routine matter. See, awarding the death penalty in a case involving drug peddling not warranted. The maximum punishment for that offence could be long-term imprisonment or at the most light-term imprisonment, not the death sentence. Okay.
So my question is to Mr. Salil sir. Sir, you talked about 9/11 and how it affected human rights in its own perspective. After the forthcoming of 9/11, the US implemented the Patriot Act, and recently we saw that the Patriot Act actually breached a lot of privacy of the US citizens, and which led to a lot of violation of human rights. So my question primarily targets when governments make legislations like the Patriot Act in different countries or any other name the act, and they actually have a different initiative behind it. The aim is different, and it is to breach the privacy of other individuals in the state. Is there any countermeasure that can be taken by the individuals of the state or individuals of that particular country to ensure that their basic right of privacy or human right is not violated?
Just is really putting me in the top. He knows a lot more about this than me. But I think that, what happens is when it comes to national security, once you say that something is national security, then it gets shrouded in secrecy and mystery. And so particularly the Patriot Act, anyway, the US is notorious for double standards, because all the rich countries are constantly telling developing countries that your human rights are bad. But it depends on which developing country. If it's their friend, they'll keep quiet. So, I mean, right now you can see what Trump is doing with Venezuela. So they are bombing in the Caribbean. But if Saudi Arabia or one of these Gulf countries who are their friends, they do it, then they look the other way. So I would say that US double standards, we need a different session to talk about that. But are there safeguards when you have these counter-terrorism legislations? Unfortunately, not enough. In fact, even for example, in drone use, we have raised this. Many human rights organizations have raised this question as to there has to be some checks and balances, some process as to because they say that if a decision to use a drone or whatever elements like extraordinary rendition, for example, which is essentially a fancy word for torture. In a situation post 9/11, a lot of the standard kind of human rights, safeguards were completely violated, and they have been challenged. And there are international courts also where you can challenge it. But when it comes to the US, they get away with anything. So because they're just more powerful.